Dylan Penningroth's book is beautifully written. I honestly don't think he puts a word wrong. And that's extraordinary because he's working through so many really very obscure records from local county courthouses, and he manages to summarize them with extraordinary concision. So you don't get bogged down in any single example, but what emerges from it is a very rich picture of daily life in the American South, one in which Black people are the central actors. This book for me is a revelation. It's going to change the way I think about rights and privilege and property for the rest of my career as a historian.
I loved about this book that Dylan Penningroth took a strategy, a technique, a use of legal records, and introduced us to a whole new set of ideas, and through those ideas, a whole different way of thinking and understanding a time period that we might have thought that we already were very familiar with, or certainly that, has been well studied.
Legal history is often, dry and officious, and of course, forget the pun, legalistic. But this manages to humanize the story. And it shows, it's a story that shows how the quotidian, legal creativity of African Americans during and after the Civil War paved the way, I would say, for what we now call the Civil Rights Movement.
He really gives us a beautiful combination of social history and legal history, and shows us how ordinary Black Americans in slavery and in freedom made use of civil rights that went beyond voting rights. The way that they used property ownership and contracts to expand the privileges that they could assert, even if they didn't have rights that they were being granted.
I think most readers of modern history will know of the long, noble, and often very troubled history of the civil rights movement for African American rights. But very few, I suspect, will know the story that Penningroth tells in this book. It's a story of how legal rights were used not just in the 1950s and 1960s, but actually as early as the years after the American Civil War, nearly a century before, essentially to assert rights that the African American population wanted to make sure that they had in wider society.